I had been in a relationship for the past 3 years. We were both in our early 30s. By the second year, it became clear that this could be the relationship of a lifetime. We were an unstoppable force when we worked together, with the kind of bond where just one glance was enough to understand what the other was thinking. No matter how bad our conflicts got, we always strived to work through them. I used to think that saying, "I love you," simply meant acknowledging strong feelings for someone. But I never truly understood what it meant to love someone unconditionally until I met her. Even her minor imperfections, both physical and emotional, became things I cherished and couldn't imagine living without. Everything felt perfect, except for one thing: we never got the chance to live together. I'm allergic to cats, and she is too. Until we could find a long-term solution where the cats could be kept on a separate floor, I could only spend weekends at her place to keep my allergy manageable. The turning point began last year. I noticed that she had started hiding her feelings, and eventually we had a long overdue conversation. It turned out that many small issues had built up, down to something as simple as her wanting more kisses, and now she felt that our breakup was inevitable. I spent the next few weeks trying to prove that we could overcome this rough patch. Then came an ordinary April morning. She had to work weekends now, so after she left early, I woke up on her side of the bed, stretched, and accidentally knocked over some things on her nightstand. As I picked them up, I noticed a notebook titled Current Mood. I didn't think much of it. She had been tracking her mood daily on her phone for a while and had shared it with me. Expecting to see pages full of smiley faces, I opened it. Instead, I found an entry that read, "Things are lukewarm with Dusty Deputy." A wave of emotions hit me. What wasn't working? We had just talked about this a few weeks ago. I kept reading and uncovered something even worse. These entries were dated before our conversation and described emotional interactions with 6 different men, some of which had clearly crossed the line into emotional infidelity. It was a gut punch. I couldn't believe this had been happening behind my back. But as I sat there the rest of the day, I realized that invading her privacy wasn't justified either. From what I could tell, these interactions had started only after she had already convinced herself that our relationship was coming to an end. So, I decided that the best course of action was to work through our issues and let her come to the realization on her own that she shouldn't have been doing this. For the next 3 to 4 weeks, I kept checking her journal, but when I saw no further entries, I realized that this was damaging my ability to trust her. I needed to either fully trust her or walk away. I set my boundary: physical cheating would be my red line, and let things be. In December, we went on vacation. During the trip, she mentioned wanting to start a new journal, so I found a quiet spot nearby while she wrote. She talked about how we were at a high point in our relationship and how great things were. It was a peaceful moment. I browsed my phone while she poured her thoughts onto paper. Jokingly, I asked if she would let me read it. She pressed the journal against her chest and told me how much of an invasion of privacy it would be to read it. That's when the fear came rushing back, and I realized she was still talking to those men. When we got back, I had to take a look at the new journal. It was a mixed bag. On one hand, she had started putting some of them into the right boxes, but for others, the process was still ongoing, and some hadn't even been addressed yet. I had to accept it as progress, even though it wasn't the kind of progress I felt I needed at that moment. At the end of the month, I was supposed to move in with her, a necessary decision to cope with my cat allergy, but also a financial move so we could eventually afford a place where the cats could be separated. The following weekend, I arrived and started moving in my things. She said she was going to bed early, and I went to set up the guest room as my office. Her journal was sitting on the counter, out in the open, just left there. I couldn't shake the thought that finding one last confirmation that those men had been properly put in their right boxes would finally put my doubts to rest. Instead, I discovered the truth. It had already happened. One of them had been over twice in the past week. Worse yet, he knew about me, was married, had 2 kids, and a wife dying of cancer. The dam finally broke. I told her I knew, and everything fell apart. Now, for weeks later, I still don't feel like I have solid ground beneath me. I've been reaching out to friends nonstop, scheduling visits with a therapist. My logic and emotions are at odds in a way I've never experienced before. I just don't know what's next. I never thought someone could betray me like this. For weeks had passed, but the feeling of standing on the edge of a cliff hadn't gone away. A storm of thoughts raged inside me. I kept trying to piece everything together, but the answers slipped through my fingers. I left the same evening I found out. Packed my things without a word, not giving her a chance to explain. She tried to speak, to say something, but I couldn't hear a single word. The only thing I needed at that moment was to get as far away from her as possible. The first night after the breakup was a blur. I couldn't sleep, checking my phone every 5 minutes, hoping or maybe dreading to see a message from her. But nothing came. Did she not care? Or did she just know there was nothing left to say? I moved in with a friend who, luckily, had a place for me. He didn't ask questions, didn't offer advice, he was just there. We sat in silence, drank cheap beer, and watched movies I don't even remember. Each day was a struggle. Work became my escape, the only place where I could shut off my thoughts and focus on tasks. But even there, in moments of stillness, my mind drifted back to her. Why did she do it? Why didn't she stop when we still had a chance? Why did she keep smiling at me, telling me everything was fine, while someone else had been in our home behind my back? I tried not to seek answers, but I needed them anyway. 2 weeks later, she texted me. I'm sorry. Just 2 words. I stared at the screen, feeling my stomach twist. There was so much I wanted to say, but no words felt right. I could have asked, why? I could have told her she had broken me. I could have asked for explanations I knew I would never truly get. But instead, I just closed the message and didn't reply. A few days later, she texted again. I want to explain. If you're willing to listen. I wasn't ready, but part of me wanted to hear the truth. I knew the truth wouldn't bring relief, but maybe it would help me finally close this chapter. We met in a park. It felt strange. She looked tired, but not broken. A wave of anger stirred inside me. She looked like she had already made peace with it, like she hadn't been through the storm I had. Why was the only word I could manage. She was silent for a long time. I don't know, she finally said. At first, it was just talking. I thought I was missing something. I never meant for it to go that far. I clenched my fists. But it did. Yeah, she said quietly. I'm not trying to justify myself. She hesitated. Just what? I was just afraid to admit to myself that I had already broken us. I wanted to tell her that it wasn't her who had tried to save us, it was me. But the words stuck in my throat. She looked at me with sadness. I know there won't be forgiveness, but I still wanted to say it. I sat in silence for a long time. Then I slowly nodded. Yeah, there won't be. I stood up, turned around, and walked away. A few more weeks passed. I kept going to therapy, kept piecing myself back together. It still hurt, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was moving forward. Her last message came a month later. I hope that one day, you'll be happy. I stared at it for a while. Then I simply deleted it and kept moving forward.